Good morning. It's Jim from Maverickstar Observatory, as you know. Guys, I wanted to talk about in this video just a few things that are massively being taken for granted right now. And, as a result of that, a lot of people are going to be really disappointed in the not too distant future. If we take a look at what we're looking at right now on North Skull today, you can see that there is a large proportion of the landmass in sub-zero temperatures, and it is largely over the northern hemisphere because of our position in its orbit around the sun at this point of the year, and the tilt that we're at, putting our northern hemisphere further away from the rising sun that we usually experience more in the summer times, where it goes a lot higher. So we're rapidly over here, in the next week or so, approaching the winter solstice, which is a point in time where the sun rises the least. But that's not what a lot of people are taking advantage of and just taking for granted. That we have these, in the northern southern hemispheres, these changes of climate due to the position of our orbit and the angle of our Earth on its rotational axis. What is being taken for granted is this modern attitude that people have, and the modern standard of living that we've got over the northern hemisphere. You see, the thing is that the majority of the people on our planet live in the northern hemisphere, and if we look at historical records going back over the last 6,000 years with climate, we see that we are overall going into a cooler period of time. And I wouldn't be surprised if we was actually heading back into a glacial period, because this is overdue. 12,000 years ago we was in a glacial period, and not only that, there was something coincidental about that period of time, is we was also in a changing magnetic time where the Earth experienced an excursion, or a magnetic excursion as it's commonly known. And that was just two things that was taking place 12,000 years ago. To this present day, we are facing a dwingling climate with regards to temperatures getting lower and lower, and we are also back in a time where the Earth's magnetic poles are going through a reversal. Something else, if we look at the solar activity over the last 11,000 years, we'll also see a picture of a decay over that period of time. Again, 12,000 years ago we was in a glacial period and having a magnetic reversal, and today we are back in the same time where the Earth's temperature is decreasing, and we are facing another magnetic reversal. But the point is, how do we feed the majority of the population when we look at this chart and see that, okay, we're in the winter time over the northern hemisphere, we can in the summer times produce crops in some of these regions, so long as we don't have flash floods, and we're experiencing a lot of that, or we don't have prolonged winter spells where they arrive a month early or extend to a month after they normally should. As a result, it catches farmers out, because the seasons are no longer predictable as they have been in more steadier times in our younger history of probably the last 600 years. This was the very thing that our ancient climate, our ancient civilizations had to deal with. And they built big structures, like nowhere on the scale of our cities today, but they built structures which they were reluctant to leave, and almost try their best to ride out the climatic changes in the history of the Earth. And as a result, we see civilizations like the Mayans dramatically coming to an end of an era. Another culture, if we go over to Egypt, was a culture that was obsessed by seasons, because they knew to feed the cities they had to produce large numbers of crops, and if they didn't get those crops in, people would leave the cities, go back to hunter-gathering, because it was more successful for them to obtain their foods. I've talked about Aborigines in Australia being more adapted to that climate. If the majority of Australian people today had to live like Aborigines, they would fail simply because they don't have the skills that Aborigines did, who were the natives on that island, on that continent, and they learned through just being there how to survive in that harsh environment during perhaps 1,000 years of evolving with the climate, and dealing with the problems that would arise, and therefore having to adapt on how they got their water, how they got their food, and so on and so forth. I think the majority of them were just hunter-gatherers and migrators across that continent, a lot like the Native American people were. The Native Americans didn't build cities. They lived in small communities. A lot of them, as you know, were Indians, and or Cherokee Indians, or whatever, part of that Indian population or native Indian population. I'm not being rude, I'm just generally talking about it, but they were migratory people. They would, when the climate would no longer sustain enough food for them and the cattle, they would migrate to another part of the country where it was fertile lands and they could sustain themselves. We do not have this privilege today in our day and time because of the borders that we have now established. So, how do we tackle the problem of, first of all, working together on serious issues that we're going to face in the future, with a climate which is most certainly likely to lead us back into a glacial period. We don't know really the full repercussions of the magnetic reversal, what they're going to do, and how do we produce the food that we need to keep the majority of the population on our planet fed during times which could be impossible. It's not just, when we look at this map, the continents that are covered in sub-zero temperatures. It's the continents that are around the equatorial region, like Brazil, Africa, and over there in the Philippines. A lot of these countries experience droughts, and the reason why these areas are not the bread bowls of the world is because the unpredictable climate that even they are experiencing. So climate on general with regards to seasonal crops has changed globally within the last 20 to 30 years on our planet, and now we're starting to see the repercussions as arable land goes offline, and I'm sure you're fully aware of that. But a knock-on effect, which I've mentioned before, is farmers committing suicide because they can't get the crops. They borrow money against next year's crop, hoping that next year's going to be better for them. They'd fail to pay that, therefore the land gets repossessed off them, and they have lost lands that have been in their families probably hundreds of years and many generations that it's been passed down to, and they see themselves as the biggest failure in the ancestral record of their family because of these situations. And at the same time, we have big companies, which I'm not going to mention, are manufacturing genetically modified seeds that promise they will grow in the new conditions, but because they're either designed for drought or wet use, and the unpredictable climate, it just makes it a big gamble, and therefore, with any gambling, there is also a considerable risk, and that is why we see farmers, now more than ever in our day and age, putting the rope round the neck. And these are the things that we are taking for granted in the Northern Hemisphere, and they are going to come round very quickly and bite us back in the arse if we don't start to pull together on this planet and establish some international organisations that are going to look after stuff like, not just where the world's food is going to be created and how it's going to be distributed, but when tackling other problems that are directly related to ourselves with regards to pollution on this planet. And as a scientist, if I was to overlook pollution, I wouldn't be doing science any favours at all. And I'm talking about these garbage patches now that are floating around in our oceans. You know, some of them that are larger than the state of Texas, just to give you an idea. And this is poisoning the aquatic life around the world. And, you know, nobody is prepared to take any responsibility for it, because it lying in these patches lie in international waters, and there is no one country in the world which is going to foot the bill for the world's garbage clear up operation. So we need to really start getting some organisation together. And the big problem with this is, and the massive problem with this is that, you know, as history has gone on, you know, to this present day, more and more people have more and more ideas, and therefore it makes it very difficult for large amounts of people with vast you know, amounts of reasons why we should do these things or we shouldn't do these things. Makes it very hard for, you know, somebody to say, okay, for the benefit of the planet, we need to now address it. And, you know, those that are in disfavour of funding these you know, these projects to clean up these oceans, you know, are just going to simply have to bite the bullet and pay up just the same as the rest of the world is. You know, this is some of the things that we are taking for granted right now, guys. And, you know, there are a lot of other problems that we face, not just with the food production and, you know, where we produce the food, if we can produce the food, but, you know, how we are going to deal with crises like the you know, the migrating magnetic poles and the magnetic reversal that we are shortly going to be facing on this planet, and the implications which that in turn on its own will cause for us, because it doesn't just affect you know, human beings and our food production, and it doesn't just affect the climate, it affects our health in general, and not just human beings, across the biodiversities of all species it affects. And that comes down to vegetative species as well as animal and insect species. It affects everything across the range, and we have no contingency plans for these things, as well as all the other risks that we face. You know, with a low magnetic field, we are more subject to coronal mass ejections from the sun. And this again is another thing that is overdue. We saw and were well aware of what happened during the Carrington event, where the only highest level of technology at that time was telegraphs, yet it set fire to all those and put them out of business. Today we're heavily reliant on vulnerable electronics, and, you know, it would only take a moderate CME of any magnitude to, you know, knock out the grids around the world. And we know that these national grid companies that protect our or you know, supply, let's say that, let's not say that they do protect, well, I suppose they do to a certain degree, but, you know, they haven't got the provisions on the side to reboot the entire system. You know, we're facing, when you look into all these levels of crisis with regards to a CME and a weakened magnetosphere, increase in radiation, you know, we're facing very big issues in the not too distant future. One of them, and I know it's a big concern for you guys, is nuclear power stations, because all their actuation systems rely on computers and robotics, and if they lose control of those, you know, are we going to start to see you know, during the next coronal mass ejection, you know, meltdowns globally of nuclear power stations? And if that is the case, then, you know, you can only imagine the damage that this is going to cause. We only have to look back at Chernobyl to realise that when that accident took place, not only did it have a detrimental impact on the city that had to evacuate immediately, and the loss of life that was caused in putting the esophagus lid on that place, you know, but the fact that it also sterilised and made that piece of our world unusable for the next 300,000 years. So we have had a couple of disasters in that nature, one being Fukushima, which I believe today is still leaking radioactive waste into that particular part of our world, as well as that accident that took place in the Ukraine. So yeah, guys, we take it for granted, yet we are still moving into worse situations as time goes on. Yes, there is no end yet to the solar cycles that have been diminishing over the last 33 years, and if we go back in the historical record over the last 11,000 years, we are approaching a glacial period, and we have many problems that have not been resolved on our planet, and we still today do not work together. What frightens me more than anything is what behaviour I have seen recorded in our history going back to the Second World War, and that was cannibalism. And it just shows you, the mentality of modern human beings. We can still resort to barbaric acts of cannibalism. And the other thing was there was over 100,000 people dying through fighting over food rations at that point in time. So if the food bowl of the Northern Hemisphere was shut down through a dramatic change in climate, which led to us going back into a glacial period, you can only imagine the behaviour problems that we would face. And if you're one of these people that think you've stockpiled ammunition, you've stockpiled rifles, and you have a small team of people that are dedicated to protecting what you have to remember this, is that you are dealing with millions of people that have not got these things. Agriculture, as we know it, would go offline within a week, and the killing would start within probably 2 weeks. That is how vulnerable we are right now. Governments across the world in a major situation would lose continuity of government and control instantly. That is the reality of what we are looking at, and it is very likely going to be the case because of what we are seeing take place and what we are not seeing being done to ensure the continuity of the life on this planet right now. We have took advantage and neglected all the other species, millions of other species on this planet, including, can you believe it, including ourselves. Guys, it's one of the most difficult times of the month for us and the year, and this has been a December that we have never recorded on history for receiving such low funds. We've got more people now walking away from supporting our channel, despite us pushing really hard this year and working really hard to get the muon detectors built and put them out in the field, and increase our stations around the world. It's a very sad time. On top of this, we're trying to look at other alternative methods of us generating electricity, because that is going to be fundamental for people surviving in the future. And the cheaper we can and more reliable self-sustain ourselves in the future is going to be the thing that either makes us win or lose. I hope you agree with that. And that's why we've taken it upon ourselves, not just to continue with the research with the observatory in keeping people informed with this magnetic reversal and other anomalies that are taking place that are affecting us, like climate, but also diverting some extra time into looking at energy production for us on the cheap, something that we can all have and obtain. So I'm only hoping that we can change this around. There are 30,000 subscribers. We have 7,000 people visit the website every month, so it is completely doable. But what we need is people that are doers, and not people that just simply leave it and rely on others to do. We're a public observatory, and therefore we can only turn to the general public to support what we do. And You know, we've probably got to date, you know, tens of thousands of pounds worth of equipment that we dispose on getting and gathering the information for you guys. So, you know, there has been a massive investment already to date, but, you know, in trying to secure and keep doing what we do at this level, it is going to require at least a little bit of funding from more than a few of you that are doing it right now. So, you know, I can only ask and mention about the link. I can't make you do it. You know, it's something that you want to do. That's entirely up to you. But, you know, I've always said this on this channel. You know, you compare us to any other that talks about these subjects and ask yourself, do they actually put the equipment out in the field using the scientific method, collect that data, bring it back and relay it back to the people that need to see it? Do anybody else do that? And if not, then isn't it worth supporting what we do? At least we are the one and the few that do that for you. So links are down there. And the only other thing to say, guys, is, you know, you have a great day. I'll be back in the week, hopefully with some data from one of our stations around the world, and you know, we'll process that data and relay it back to you. Enjoy your day, guys. As always, bye for now.